Hello everybody, welcome to the Python course. In the previous lecture, we have covered module 4, that is list and tuples. So today in this lecture, we will cover the remaining part, that is tuples. Already we have covered the list part and today we are gonna cover the tuples part. In the tuples, we will see how to create a tuple, how to unpack a tuple, and tuples operations such as slicing, length and concatenation. Then we will see the difference between the tuples and a list. So let's start. First, I'll open up the Anaconda Navigator and will open a new Jupyter notebook. Okay, now I'll go to documents, GitHub projects, Python trainings and Tronic. So I will create a new Python notebook and will name it module 4, that is tuples. Okay. So what is a tuple? Tuple is a sequence of items similar to a list, right? The only difference between a list and a tuple is that tuple is immutable while list is mutable. This mutability concept we have already discussed in the list part. For those who have not watched my video, kindly you can visit and go through it. So mutable is something which is changeable. We can modify the elements in the list, we could change it, we could add some modifications to it, we could add some value to the elements in the list, but we cannot do this operation in a tuple. Tuple is immutable, it is not gonna change. Once assigned the values, it will not change, right? So let's see how to create a tuple. So let us say we wanted to represent number of hits on a blog on a particular date. How we can do it? We can do it by a list operation also. We could take the website we have visited, number of hits and the current date onto which the number of hits occurred. So this could be done by using the list operation also, as we have already seen. But if you want to put it in a tuple, you can put it by using a bracket, that is square bracket, right? Sorry, this is round bracket and this is square bracket. So square bracket you could put it by a list, and by round bracket, right, you could create a tuple. So let's see how we can create a tuple. So I will create so I've created a simple tuple and I've included 3 parameters or 3 values inside the tuple. The first value says website name, second says the number of hits occurred on this website on this date, that is the third parameter, right? When I try to access the tuple, so it will say it is a tuple. If I wanted to check whether it is really a tuple or not, so I can check it by using type, and that is, it says it is a tuple. So now we are confirmed that anything we put inside the bracket, right, that is round bracket, that is a tuple, right. Okay. So now we'll see how the packing of tuples is done, right. Now this is how we have packed all these elements inside this mytup1, right. So this is how we pack entries, or we could pack the items inside this variable named mytup1. Now we can do the unpacking of the tuples also, right. For example, I wanted to say website comma hits comma date equal to mytup, right. Now in the website is a variable in which consists of the first element of the tuple, hits consists of the second element, and date consists of the third element of the tuple. Right. So here in this case, if I wanted to access another element, let's say location, right, it will result me in the error because there are 3 elements inside the tuple and we are trying to access the 4 elements, right. So it says not enough values to unpack. It is being expected 4, but it got 3. There are only 3 elements which are present in tuple and we are trying to unpack a value which is not present in the tuple. So that is why it is giving us the not enough values to unpack error, right. So now we'll move to the indexing part. Similar to list, the tuples could be accessed by their index value, which starts from 0. Index always starts from 0, right. This we need to remember. So this is my tup1, right. If I wanted to access the 0th element, so it says www.trunic.com. If I wanted to access the first element, it says 1200, and second it says 2 June 2020, right. So this is how we could access the tuples by using their index position. Then okay, so there are different representations of a tuple. For example, this is my tup2 I have created, and I put an element named Amit. So as far as I have said that anything which is enclosed inside this round bracket, that is a tuple. So if I wanted to access, if I wanted to check the type of my tup2, that would be a tuple, but in this case it is not. So let us try to figure out why it is not. First I will show you and we'll check the type, and then we'll later on discuss why it is not a tuple. So this is my tup2, pretty fine. We have one element inside the tuple. If I wanted to check what type does the tuple, what type does the my tuple has, so it is a string. But accordingly, as I have already told you that anything which is enclosed under this round bracket is a tuple, but here in this case it is not a tuple. So let us discuss why it is not. If you don't put a comma after the bracket, it is a single element, and you don't put a comma, that automatically becomes a string, no matter what you put a bracket inside it, right. If you try to put a comma, it means that it is a tuple, right. So now if I put a comma inside this bracket and then try to access the type, it says it is a tuple. So this is the most important interview question while preparing or for your interview. So interview may ask you this kind of question and may confuse you, but don't get confused. If a single element exists inside the round bracket without a comma, that is a string. If it exists with a comma, that is a tuple. This thing you need to remember. So here blog underscore hits, we have represented myblog.com, and if we type the type and check what type of data type it is, so it will be a string. But if we put the same condition by a comma, then it will be changed into a tuple. This thing we need to remember. It must have a comma in case of a single element. Right. Now we'll move to the tuple operations. So basically there are three operations we can do on a tuple. Tuple is immutable. This thing we already know, and we have seen that we cannot change anything inside the tuple. We cannot modify the value. Let us try to modify some value. So this is my tup 2. At the 0th position we have Amit, and I wanted to change Amit to Sumit. It's a tuple object does not support item assignment. So we cannot assign a value inside the tuple. We cannot change the position or value present at the index position to some other value. So that is why tuples are immutable. Right? Okay, so that is why we cannot change it, we cannot modify it. So that's why we have less number of operations. So moving to the operations part, so we have only 3 operations which can be done on tuples. That is, we could calculate its length, we could concatenate it, we could add 2 tuples, and we can do the slicing part. Slicing is similar to what we have seen in the lists. So this you have got familiar with, right? So let us take these operations step by step. So first we'll try to calculate the length of a tuple. So length can be calculated by using the length keyword, and my tup2, it says only one element is present, right? If I wanted to check how many elements are present in my tup1, so there are 3 elements present in my tup1, right? Then we have my tup1 and my tup2, right? So I wanted to add these 2 tuples. So what I can do is plus my tup2. So it has become a 1 tuple. So we have added some of the elements inside this tuple 1, and we could assign it a my tup3. So this is how we could add an element inside the another tuple. Now you can see my tup3 consists of a combination of my tup1 and my tup2, right? So this is the concatenation operation which works on tuple. Then we have the slicing, right? So slicing could be also be done as we have already seen in the list part. So we wanted to access the 0th element to the 3rd element, my tup3, right? So 0 to 3 will yield us elements starting from the 0th position and will iterate through the 0, 1, 2, not 3. So 3 will be excluded in this part. Similarly, if we wanted to have elements starting from 2 up till the end, we could do it by this. So starting from 2nd up till the end. If we wanted to have the elements 0 up till third position that we can do it, right? So this is how your slicing will work on tuples similar to list, right? Then we have already seen tuples are immutable. If we try to change the element or the index position value at that index position, we cannot change it because they are immutable. We cannot change it. It does not support item assignment. Okay. Now we'll cover the tuple and the list uses. You can see in this slide, so there is a list in which there are some colors. Now this color contains a list, right, which is present, and the list contains some entries of tuples. So we could have a tuple inside the list. So this is how we could have it, right? Similarly, red corresponds to some value, green corresponds to some other value, and blue similarly some value. So this is how we can represent these tuples inside the list, right? So now the other part is that we wanted to change its functionality to list, because tuple has some kind of functionality, right, some kind of limitation which says that tuples are immutable. We wanted to make tuples as mutable, right? So but we cannot do it while it is being treated as tuples. So the alternative to this part is that we can convert a tuple into a list. We could do a list operation, and then we could convert back tuple to a list to a tuple, right? So that way we have the flexibility. We can convert one data type to another data type, as we have already seen in the module 2, data type conversions, right? So here in this case we have my tup3, right? Now I create my list 3 equal to my tup3, and I will convert this tuple into a list by using the list keyword. So what this operation will do, it will convert this tuple into a list. Now as you know that list is mutable, so we could add elements in the list, right, by using the append method. And then we could convert back this my list 3 into my tup3. So that will see my tup3 equal to my list 3, right? Now you are converting right. Now this tuple has been created, and we get the value Sunil because it was inserted by list operation, right? So this way you could interchange tuple into a list or list into a tuple, or the vice versa, right? So this is how tuple operations can be done. Then in case of functions, so tuples are used to return multiple values from a function. This will again see when we will do the functions part, right? But here one thing to remember, when we are returning some value from a function, it will be always be returned in tuples. That is when we are trying to return multiple values. Single value could be returned in any format, right? But the multiple values could be returned as a tuple, right? So this thing we need to keep in mind, that while returning multiple values from a function, the multiple values are returned in the form of a tuple. Okay. Now this is a program which is used to replace which we wanted to replace the last value of a tuple in a list. For example, we have the input part, that is enclosed in a list, and inside the list we have some tuple values. We have three tuples, right? So what we wanted to do is we wanted to replace 40 by 100, 60 by 100, 90 by 100. That is, inside the list we have a tuple. We wanted to change the third element to 100, right? This operation we wanted to do it. But now the challenge arises is that we cannot modify, right, the tuple values because it is immutable. So how we could solve this problem, right? So now in this lecture I have told you the tuples operations. We could only use the length, we could only use the concatenation, and we could only use the slicing part. So I'll give you a hint to solve this problem. First you have to iterate the values inside your list one by one. Then you slice the first and the second part, and then add 100 to it, and then put it back to the list, right? First you create an empty list, that would be your output, and then you iterate your input, slice the first two entries, add the third by using a concatenation, and then put it back inside the empty list. So this program I want you to try it out, and in the next lecture we will discuss it and solve, right? So thank you guys, thanks for watching.